Hi, everyone. I'm Monistic Idealism. I'm here with my co-host, fellow Chad Kyle, and we're here with a prolific panpsychist, author, and professional philosopher, David Skrbina. It's a real pleasure to have him here. We're very honored. And I believe, Kyle, you had some other comments to add to this intro here?
Yeah, he's got multiple works into which is one of them being Panpsychism in the West, which is huge. He also has some tidbits with working with Panpsychism plus panentheism, which is another great work. I think he's eco philosophy as well. So he dabbles in quite a bit. So quite the Renaissance man.
So thank you, David.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
All right. So I guess I'll just jump right into the questions. So the first one would be, how would you place your panpsychism? If panpsychism is a meta theory of consciousness that is compatible with any main theory of mind, such as, materialism, idealism, or dualism, where would you place your panpsychism?
Well, right. So I've written in my book about it as a kind of meta theory, as you said in the question. So it's like a higher order theory, right? So it's not ascribing a specific concept or theory of mind. It's really just kind of saying who has it, right? I mean, there's different questions about the nature of mind, philosophy of mind. When I spent many years teaching philosophy of mind at the University of Michigan, um, I would typically say, well, look, there's kind of three basic questions about the mind, right? What is it? What is it? What is the mind? Uh, how does it relate to the body? Because it's kind of this sort of nominal dualistic question. And then the third question was, who has it? Who has mind and why? And I would focus much on my discussions around those three questions, right? What is the mind? How does it relate to the body? And who has it? And so there's lots of different theories about what the mind is and how it relates to the body, or is it identical to the body, or is there a dualistic interaction? But panpsychism sort of in that third question, right? Who has it? Who of all the things, right, in the big picture, who of everything in the universe has this quality that we might call mind, or subjectivity, or experientiality? So in a sense, it's removed from the actual theory of mind. I guess in principle, it can work with almost any other theory of mind, because most theories of mind don't actually say who has mind. You know what I mean? It's talking about what a concept is of mind. It's presumably talking about humans. It never quite says it. It maybe sort of implies the higher animals. They never really tell you what those are. And then that's just it. It's all implicit background discussion. They don't really answer the question, who of all the things in the universe has this quality called mind? And if not everything, then why only a subset? And what's the rationale for that subset, right? So I think that's the sense that I've been talking about it as a meta theory. It's sort of a higher order question, right? Give me your philosophy of mind. That's one level, and then the higher level is, now who does that apply to? Does it apply to humans? Does it apply to animals? Does it apply to plants? Does it apply to inanimate things? Does it apply to systems and aggregates, right? So I guess that's sort of how I tend to think about panpsychism at sort of the highest level.
And where would you place your panpsychism? Because I know it's like you said, it's a meta theory. So are you like an idealistic panpsychist or perhaps a more physicalist panpsychist?
Yeah, no, I mean, so that's kind of the separate question, right? So I've kind of argued myself for a kind of a dual aspect monism view. I'm sort of a parallelist, I guess, in the model of Spinoza and some others. But yeah, dual aspect monism, I think, is to me a most compelling theory. It's entirely compatible with panpsychism. It sort of fits the data the best, I think. So that's where I would sort of place my own conception of mind.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, I think Kyle has a question here.
Yeah, so when we have the dual aspect monisms, and this is one of the things that pop up a lot, they always ask, like the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, panpsychism offers a middle way between physicalism and dualism. So like you said, panpsychism is a meta theory of mind compatible with materialism, dualism, idealism, etc. So then if we're saying a dual aspect monism, would that be like answering a question, another question? Because it's both, right? It's two facets, the same thing, but which is more fundamental than if you're trying to be deeper? And Yeah.
Yeah, right. It's right. It's a little bit of a funny situation to describe. To me, it's a little bit like a mirror image kind of thing. When I've talked about it in class, I would tell students, well, think about a coin, right? You have a coin. It's got the heads and the tails, right? The two sides. And you look at the one side of a coin, the heads, and you see the whole coin. You've got the whole picture right there until you turn it around, and then you also have the whole coin, the whole picture, but it's a completely different perception on that same coin. And then those two fronts and backs, they align at every point, so to speak. And that's kind of the little picture that I try to draw in my teachings, right? That it's sort of these things, they align sort of point to point in kind of a front back, maybe inside outside sort of view. It's not really a causal connection. That's not the right way to think about it. It's sort of this parallelistic structure between the mental aspect and the physical aspect. And I think it has the benefit of explaining how you can look at the universe sort of just from the one side, and all you see is the physical stuff, and it seems to be complete. You've got causal closure of the physical, and everything sort of makes sense, except you're missing the whole other side. And then you flip it around, and you can also make sense of the entire universe completely from a mental or an idealistic side. That's where this power of idealism comes from. So to me, it's kind of like, this explains both of them by sort of showing this compatible structure between the mental side, if you will, and the physical side. I mean, that doesn't explain everything. There's obvious questions. Well, why are there two sides? Why aren't there 3 or 5 or 10? Or, and so, okay, I mean, there's some sort of brute facts that we just can't really explain why they are the way they are. But I think at least that's a beneficial picture that I think does a lot for us in terms of explaining kind of how mind fits into the bigger picture.
I really appreciate that answer there, and I think you got really fundamental there, and I think that's very important. Not to throw any shade, but those like Philip Goff, yeah, like as Kyle said, written in the Stanford Encyclopedia, they try to present panpsychism as this middle way between these views. But I think you are more accurately put it in the Internet Encyclopedia that, well, it's more of a meta theory, so you have to get more fundamental if you really want to present those alternatives. And I think your dual aspect monism really gets at the heart of that. So I guess my next question here is it's a bit vague, but it's, I guess, what are the many forms of panpsychism, or perhaps the main forms of panpsychism?
Well, there's different ways to describe it, right? I mean, different authors. You can look back at history, and there's obviously many diverse sort of views about how different philosophers have articulated something like panpsychism. It's really kind of striking how much variety there is when you look through the history, right? This is in my book on panpsychism in the West, right? You go through all these brilliant minds of history, and they all sort of take a slightly different angle. It's still a panpsychist worldview, but they always put a little different spin in it. So, I mean, I guess in principle, you could have dozens of different forms of panpsychism, depending if you take more of a holistic picture or a theological picture or kind of a force-based, active agent picture. I mean, so there's lots of sort of forms about it. In the modern day, I think we tend to talk more about maybe like weak panpsychism versus strong panpsychism. Maybe we'd say things are, there's kind of a psyche that goes down to some fundamental elements, fundamental particles, whatever they may be, but maybe not all of them. Maybe only certain integrated objects have minds, but not aggregates of objects. So there are forms of panpsychism that do exclude some things, sort of like not literally everything that you could conceive or that exists. So they're sort of, I guess, we would tend to call those softer forms of panpsychism that allow for certain exceptions or conditional statements. For myself, I'm sort of on the stronger side. I really sort of think literally everything, every collection of things really has this sort of mental component to it as a kind of singular mental experience. It has certain advantages to that view, but obviously introduces other problems as well.
Okay, brilliant. I think Kyle here has a question.
Yeah, this will bring me down to one of the big questions that pop up. And obviously, you've worked with Dr. Galen Strawson a lot, and he would consider panpsychism, or at least his form, as a form of physicalism. But then others like Chalmers or Goff will be like, no, it's it's its own thing, right? This has so much confusion with it too. And then when you break it down too, you can almost get to the point, Strawson almost sounds like an idealist. There's no non-experiential stuff. There's just consciousness, and but it's physical. So is it just a labeling thing that we consider this stuff to be physical, but it's intrinsically all mental? And then that's a really big one right now.
Yeah, I know Galen seems to be kind of sort of evolving in his views over the years. If you go back over the last 10 or 20 years, right? And I mean, for a while, he was pretty much, I think, in the sort of the dual aspect monism camp, kind of, experiential and non-experiential reality, kind of depending how you viewed it. Sort of viewing them both as kind of equally fundamental rather than picking one or the other. I think in recent years, he's kind of transitioned, like you say, more to the idealist form, where he kind of says, well, look, when it really gets down to it, all we really know is experiential reality. That's what our whole experience is, obviously, is about experiential reality. That's really all that we know that exists. That's all that we can know that exists. We have no reason to believe there is anything that counts as non-experiential reality.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting sort of view, and when he really presses the logic, it is in defense of a kind of idealism. So yeah, I mean, I'm certainly sympathetic to that. I guess I mean, idealism always going back to Berkeley, has always kind of had interesting, compelling arguments that no one can really sort of defeat, because that's the nature of what they are. Everything gets filtered through your mind. So, explain to me something that's not filtered through your mind, and you can't, because that's just how your mind works. And so you're sort of stuck with a Berkeleyan idealism, in some ways. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, idealism is sort of one of those things where you kind of say, yeah, the arguments are good. I can't really defeat it in terms of an argument, but somehow I can't quite believe it either. So it's to me, it's one of those funny gray areas. Like I say, I'm sympathetic, obviously, with Galen's views. Like I say, to me, the sort of this dual aspect monism is more satisfying, because it kind of does account for this closure of the physical, which is a pretty compelling sort of story. But yeah, that's kind of how I would see it.
That's understandable. And so this leads into another question here perfectly. So what is strong panpsychism? And I guess another thing that could be attached to it, do you accept something more like micropsychism or cosmopsychism?
Right. So as I was saying, strong panpsychism sort of literally includes all structures, all objects, and all systems of all objects, combinations, sort of unlimited combinational theory of mind, if you will. So yeah, I mean, this is an interesting idea. It actually goes back to Leibniz, who was a famous panpsychist philosopher, late 1600s, early 1700s, and he wanted to exclude aggregates of things. So he was basically a panpsychist. Everything has a monad like mental quality. But he excluded, armies, and groups of people and societies and collections of aggregates of things, which he did not think possessed a unified mind. So the things individually, the components did, but not the collection of the components. And it's really interesting when you go into Leibniz and try to figure out what exactly was his rationale for, excluding these things. And he had very fuzzy sort of phrases when you kind of look into what he was actually saying. And it wasn't not really very satisfying, his answer that comes up, well, some things are sort of glued together tightly, and that's one thing, and that has one mind. If it's not glued together very tightly, then it's two things, and then it has two minds. Well, okay, I mean, so, is it like the strength of the glue that matters? How close do these things have to be, two things have to be to become one thing, right? And Leibniz didn't give a good answer. Latter-day philosophers try to do the same thing. Process philosophers have done the same thing. David Ray Griffin was sort of a notable process panpsychist. Wanted to exclude, Whitehead did the same thing, wanted to exclude aggregates. Was kind of a soft panpsychism, but they never could give a really compelling argument as to how and why that's a necessary exclusion. So to me, personally, right, I'm accepting a strong form. Micropsychism that you mentioned sort of goes all the way down to the smallest ultimates, whatever they might be. It's not atoms and protons, it's quarks, or elements of quarks and leptons, or God knows what the latest theory is. But whatever those ultimate things are, does the psyche go all the way down to those things? And I think yes, it does. It pretty much has to, otherwise we get into an emergentist position, which is extremely hard to explain. So that's the micropsychism, psyche down to the micro level, the smallest micro level. Cosmopsychism goes the other way to the highest level of orders, the whole universe, presumably the cosmos. And then the question is there sort of a cosmic psyche or a mind of the cosmos? I also think there is. I agree, and I've argued that there is. It's something like, again, it's an ancient idea. It goes back to Plato and the world soul or something, where there's kind of the psyche was built into the structure of the universe. So to me, I'm sort of arguing for the whole spectrum, from the whole cosmos, the largest scale, down to the smallest scale, and everything in between, and combinations of everything in between. So to me, that's a pretty, I think on most readings that would count as a strong form of panpsychism. I think probably most panpsychists today aren't quite there. They're willing to make certain exceptions at some level along that spectrum, or excluding aggregates or other sort of special cases, which would count them as softer panpsychists. Again, they have sort of a lot of explaining to do, how they justify what gets excluded versus what is included. But obviously arguments can be made.
Okay, I really appreciate that. Quick follow up. Do you place any priority on the micro or the cosmic? Like, do you think there's first a cosmic mind, which then breaks up into the micro, or do you think the micro combines together to build up the cosmic, or do you have something else in mind?
Yeah, that's interesting. Because we've talked in philosophy about the combination problem, right? How you build up higher order consciousnesses from smaller consciousnesses. And we spent a lot of time our sort of argument, how's that possible? And it doesn't really seem like it makes sense. And it's kind of a tricky question and so forth. And it's an interesting question. And then some turn that around, right? So, well, look, then you start at the highest level, start at the cosmopsyche, and you break that down into smaller subunits. And then you sort of have a decombination problem, right? How do you break down this cosmic psyche if that's the primordial psyche? And then how do you get to the psyche of the individual elements, like humans and animals and atomic particles and whatever?
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess I don't know. I mean, to me, I don't view one as a priority or more fundamental than the other. It's sort of again, that's my monistic leanings. You sort of get the whole ball of wax all at once. I mean, if we follow the Big Bang picture, what you had at some point, maybe a state of pure energy. And so you didn't really have structure. You didn't have subatomic particles. Maybe you had photons, or maybe you had elements of quantum energy, right, at some very early stage, maybe just prior to the Big Bang. Did you even have a universe or a cosmos? Doesn't really even make sense to talk about it at that point. So to me, it's a little bit probably like chasing your tail here to kind of say, well, which is more important, right? The atomic consciousness or the cosmic consciousness? And you're sort of just kind of spinning around like, well, that came out of some hot, energetic soup that didn't really make sense then. And maybe as the cosmos came into being, sort of in parallel to the microstructures coming into being, you can kind of see mind coalescing maybe simultaneously there. I guess that's kind of the picture I would argue. I haven't really elaborated that in writing to this point, but that's what I would probably argue for.
Hey, but that's perfect timing. Hey, that's what this interview's for. Things that maybe haven't been written before, we can get it out now. So I know Kyle's got something to share here. What do you got, buddy?
Yep.
Oh, just real quick. Yeah, when people are talking about, that atomistic panpsychism, well, it kind of fell away to quantum fields. So now you might just have these huge experiential field per se that would break down, and people would some panpsychists have pondered that maybe the Big Bang was this huge experiential moment, you could say, or anyway, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's interesting, right? If you talk about quantum fields, and this is sort of one area that I've been sort of thinking about lately, is kind of the connection between minds and fields. So it is really kind of an intriguing sort of aspect of thinking about this. You know, in a way, physicists for quite a long time have been saying fields are the ultimate reality. It's not particles. It's fields or fields of quantum fields, or maybe probabilistic fields or something like this, right? Um, and then those sort of sound really kind of esoteric and sort of quite interesting. But there are some kind of nice parallels to the sort of the fuzzy statistical probabilistic notion of kind of the mind and how experience seems to work. And so yeah, I mean, I'm really kind of intrigued lately, sort of what is this connection between minds and fields. If fields are really kind of an ultimate thing in the physical side, then sort of by my own theory, they should sort of be an ultimate counterpart. There should be as kind of a mind of a field, right? So I've been interested in that lately, and that may be a project for a future book, sort of trying to flesh that out, what that would actually mean, right? What that connection could be.
I would read that book.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it'd be interesting if we could really get somewhere on that. So yeah.
So I just wanted to break down for some of the nitty-gritty of strong panpsychism. So actually, one thing that's popping up lately too is a pure panpsychism too. Uh, Maybe that's synonymous. Some people do break it down as a relabeling of idealism again, like an objective idealism. I don't know if you just want to quickly touch on that before we dig into some questions about strong panpsychism.
Pure panpsychism versus
Yeah.
objective idealism.
Yeah, it's some people have broken it down. They're like, well, it either collapses into idealism, it is idealism, or maybe it's substance dualism. Because then you argue about the extrinsic and intrinsic, and that's a whole problem. But which side do you start on?
Yeah. I don't. I mean, objective idealism is kind of an interesting phrase. I think it goes back to Peirce, who was kind of talking about objective idealism as kind of a form of panpsychism that he argued back in the early 1900s. Or yeah, some of it I think comes from Schopenhauer even as well. Yeah, I mean, it seems like a contradiction, it's like an oxymoron, objective idealism in a way, but yeah, objectifying the mind. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, to me, that's kind of yeah. I think about Schopenhauer if I'm thinking about an objectified, like a solidified kind of mind, and that's really kind of how Schopenhauer talked about it. I always thought that was kind of an intriguing view. I've lectured quite a bit on that over the years. Um, again, I'm sort of comfortable with that. I think that's a kind of a compelling sort of picture. Um, it's maybe a little bit too much on the idealistic side for me, but it's really sort of an intriguing view that's certainly compatible with a panpsychist outlook.
Okay, so this will bring us back to physical stuff. So when we talk about physical, and this gets people tripped up a lot, and we'll say it's two sides of the same coin, as you brought it up. So some people like Goff, among others, will bring up physical stuff, but they'll say all there is to this physical stuff is consciousness. Strawson again has mentioned that before. So when we do accept the intrinsic nature argument, etc., from Eddington and Bertrand Russell about the intrinsic nature, you have that first person point of view, that conscious awareness, mentality, quality, whatever you want to call it, stuff. I guess it's like, why do you use the word physical? Is it simply just a label to explain that outside stuff, the extrinsic appearance of intrinsically mental stuff? So it's just kind of like a colloquial term, you could say.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's well, it's got a history to it, like everything else. Right? So physical comes from physis, which is nature. So just the stuff in nature that's around you. Right, a very old word goes back to the Greeks. So it just physical kind of stuff. in maybe a more modern sense, it sort of inherently means sort of the non-experiential stuff. That's at least how it came to be used, right, in physics and philosophy. There's the mental stuff, which has experiences, and then there's the physical stuff, which does not. So I think probably you could virtually define the physical as non-experiential reality, right? And so many people, even now, most people would say, well, look, there's experiential reality, right? We experience things, and maybe animals do, and some animals and so forth, but that's only part of reality. There's also non-experiential reality. We'll call that physical stuff. That's apart from a mind or a consciousness or a subjectivity. So in a sense, it's a dualistic structure. There's experiential things, realities, and non-experiential realities, and we'll call those physical. So that's kind of the traditional view. And then you have immediately dualistic problems, like, is one fundamental, more fundamental than the other? Does one arise from the other? Does one emerge from the other? So when you introduce that duality, you also get a whole boatload of problems that you probably cannot resolve, because those are unresolvable questions.
Right.
And it seems like there's a fundamental error there. And probably the error is that you assume that there was non-experiential reality. So you made a division right up front that there is this physical stuff that doesn't experience, and then here I am as an experiential being, and now I'm trying to figure this out. It's like, hey, you made a mistake at step one. So go back there, erase that step. Don't assume that there is non-experiential reality. You can't defend that there is any non-experiential reality. You can't justify it. You can make an assumption about it, but it does nothing for you except introduce a boatload of problems that you cannot solve. So why even have this non-experiential reality that we call physical stuff, right? It's a misinterpretation, a misunderstanding of what that stuff is out there. And you talk about rocks and dirt, and stars and planets or whatever else you want to point to out in nature, out in space. So I guess that's sort of the view, right? When you talk about physical and mental, you're sort of making category mistakes, and you're using implicit assumptions that are not made clear, and then you get into trouble, and then you wonder why you're all tied up in knots. So it's sort of, you have to be really sort of aware of what you're doing and try to use those terms carefully, so that you don't, go into circles or sort of introduce, fake problems that come out of your false definitions or your assumptions that you used going into the whole discussion.
Yeah, you fall into pulling the territory from the map. You're coming from qualitative and then projecting this physical stuff out there is non-experiential, and then, like you said, you get that problem. Which also brings you just to the second point. So as someone, you do accept the nature, like the intrinsic nature argument, right? I'm pretty sure you do.
The intrinsic nature argument.
Yep.
Yeah, there's kind of like a Russellian sort of argument. So so yeah. I find that that's a compelling sort of argument. Yeah, they call it Russellian. I always kind of say it's Schopenhauerian because it really goes back to Schopenhauer. But I think it's a valid argument. Yeah.
Fair. But would you then accept structuralism about physics or something else?
So I guess I'm not really sure what structuralism about physics is. I mean, I'm not a physicist, but to me, structuralism relates to interrelations between things as a general term of structuralism. So presumably in physics, what it means, you can't understand things without their relations as well. Is that what you would? I guess I'm not really sure, right?
Like how people like Philip Goff phrase it, is something like this. Like, well, if you accept something like structuralism about physics, it's that physics doesn't tell you what physical things are. It only tells you how they behave, their dynamics, their structure. So, and that's what leads him to use the intrinsic nature argument. He says, since physics doesn't tell us what a physical thing is, we use consciousness, and that's what a physical thing is.
Yeah. So it's right, structure and function kind of thing. That is what you can measure and you can quantify. That's what physics tells you about. It's the extrinsic characteristics, not the intrinsic, as we said. On the inside, you see things from the outside, and you can measure and weigh and calculate those things, but you can't see them from the inside because physics has no aspect to that. So yeah, I mean, again, that's another way of talking about it. I don't know if physicists do that in any sort of formal way, but yeah, that's related to this sort of intrinsic nature argument, that there must be an interior or an inside to things. It's the counterpart to the extrinsic side that we measure and calculate with physics.
Yeah, it's coming around a lot too, that what they mean by the physical is just the behavior, or what they do in physics is sometimes just seen as the behavior of the conscious stuff, you could say. It's merely just a, like you said,
right, how it moves and how
yeah.
how it interacts and sort of pushes and pulls and energetic calculations. So yeah, I mean, those seem to be that. I mean, to me, that's sort of an argument for this, call it the physical side of reality, right? Where you can kind of see the world from this one perspective, because it does seem to work that you can do these things. But clearly that cannot be the whole thing. That's got to be at best half of your story, even if you can completely describe it in those physical terms.
Yeah, and actually this brings us to the last nitty-gritty, you could say, about what we mean by physical, which it seems kind of vague now, but so we know that there's consciousness, mentality, qualities, etc. And then the usual argument for the idealist would be, okay, well, wouldn't positing an extra beyond consciousness, that non-conscious stuff, be kind of an addition we don't need, and hence be more parsimonious? And if so, well, it kind of might be like a form of idealism. I think Timothy Sprigg went down some kind of route like that from his panpsychism. Schopenhauer seems to also be kind of like a panpsychist idealist, right? So what say you on that?
Yeah, why even introduce the non-conscious stuff, or I guess you could say the side of things, right? Yeah, that's right. Again, that's sort of what Strawson and some others have talked about, right? We really only know about the conscious side. We know about consciousness because that's what we are. We understand it intrinsically. So what's the argument for even introducing the other side? Why, yeah. So again, if you could make a point, there's really no argument, and you end up with a form of idealism. Say, well, look, this conscious side, this intrinsic side, fully explains the picture, and there it is. But to me, I'm saying, well, look, there's some kind of priority that needs to be put on what physics can do as well, and that's also kind of a complete picture of the world in its own way. And I guess to do justice to that, you kind of see that as, like I said, kind of equally fundamental or co-fundamental or parallel structure with the conscious side. If it's all just sort of a consciousness-based reality, I mean, you kind of almost have the opposite problem, right? Where you're sort of trying to explain, well, why does there even appear to be a physical side? Why do we even have these calculations that work on mass and energy and motion and so forth, charge and spin? I mean, why those things don't seem to be related to consciousness? Like, where do they come from, right? I mean, there's, it's not impossible, but it introduces kind of interesting, different sort of questions, right? Rather than accepting sort of both of them as some kind of picture of reality in themselves, and allowing them both to do justice to what we know about the world. So. Yeah.
Fair. I guess this is where everyone comes down to on it too, is saying, well, if the intrinsic is consciousness, the extrinsic is what consciousness looks like from outside. So I think Bernardo Castro has some kind of view like that too. Well, if it's intrinsically mental stuff, that's all it is. The physical is just what it looks like from outside. This is how the consciousness behaves with what we label as mass, charge, spin, etc. So again,
just right. Well, it could be.
Yeah.
I mean, you could say that's just how it looks from the outside. It takes different forms, and again, it's a sort of an objective idealist kind of view. When I used to talk about Schopenhauer in my courses, and he talks about sort of the will, right? For him, the consciousness is will. So will is objectified into solid kind of things. And I would always paint this little picture in the class about like water. And I would say, well, look, you look around the room, and I would say, we know there's water vapor in the room because there's humidity and so forth. You can't see it, but it's kind of there, right? But I can cool it down. If I take the air in the room and I cool it down and I put it through a dehumidifier, I'll end up with a little glass of water, and you can see it. because it's now condensed and you can see it, and now it's the same water, but you can see it. It becomes objective and takes an objective form. And I can take that same little glass of water, I can cool it even further, and I can bring it down to a solid form, ice cube, and I can say, look, here it is even more condensed. It has a different characteristics. It's hard, clunk, clunk. It feels different and so forth. So yeah, the same kind of, vaporous kind of thing. If I condense it down or whatever, it takes different forms. It looks like a gas. It looks like a liquid. It looks like a solid. It's all the same stuff, but in different forms. It looks to our senses as different. And I think you could make a comparable argument. That's basically Schopenhauer's argument. You could say, well, look, that's how this consciousness stuff is. It just looks different ways in different forms. Sometimes it's very airy and gaseous, and sometimes it's kind of liquidy, and sometimes it's solid, and then there's different forms of solid. And yeah, I mean, I think that's a coherent argument to make. I wouldn't have a strong objection to that. It just, again, it's a little bit sort of so idealistic, a little bit kind of out of my taste, but I mean, I'm certainly obviously sympathetic to that kind of view.
Yeah, because that's one I found just to be amazing. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something else that makes objective idealism attractive, because sometimes some people, when they hear objective, they think it means, not dependent on a mind. And so someone like Schopenhauer would say, yes, there's a world. There really is this world. It's not dependent on a mind, but its nature is still mind. And so that's something that kind of maybe soothes some people, because it's not like the chair disappears when you're not looking at it. There's still a world that persists in objective idealism. It functions just like a quote unquote physical world, but its nature is mental.
Exactly. Yeah. Berkeley had those funny little problems, right? There's like the refrigerator light. When you close the door, is the light still on? You open a book, it always looks on, but is it on when it's closed? Well, I don't know, because I can't perceive it, right? I mean, those funny little games, right, with Berkeley. And his problem, he solved the problem because he says, well, if nobody's perceiving, well, what happens to things? He says, well, look, you still got God. God's perceiving the whole universe, so God makes everything. He's always looking inside the fridge, so everything's kind of real, so don't worry about it. Okay, but that was sort of, just a little paper over, a little handy excuse that he whips God out when he needs to make everything real. Berkeley wasn't a full-blown panpsychist. If he sort of really had been a full-blown panpsychist and kind of said, well, look, everything, animals, inanimate, the chair is a perceiving thing and the refrigerator is a perceiving thing, it would have really altered his theory. He had a lot of, good insights, but he has to bring God in to save his little picture from collapsing when people aren't around. And we can avoid all that mess by saying, well, look, everything is a kind of a perceiving or a sentient or conscious sort of object, and that solves a lot of those problems for us.
That's absolutely right. That would solve the problem that Berkeley was trying to solve. Perhaps so. Okay. So let's see here. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this next section, what's interesting is you kind of answered some of these questions already. You explained in such good detail. So it's going to be a little bit more about cosmopsychism. So you already broke down for us a little bit of what that is. Would you say the entire universe is a conscious subject? Is it like one conscious subject?
Yeah, I would say there's a unified mind, a unified experience that's associated with the entire universe. So yeah, there's a kind of a highest level mind. It's obviously, kind of sounds very godlike, and yeah, I guess you could call it God if you really need to have a God. I wouldn't do it myself, but I mean, it kind of fits the model. But yeah, there's kind of a highest level unified consciousness of the whole. I think that's the logically consistent conclusion.
Okay.
So it's like it would be like a single conscious subject.
Yeah, I think right. I think there's a singular mind, a singular experience somehow that's associated with the entire universal system. So yeah, yep.
Okay, and so I know you kind of answered before. You kind of see it as maybe it's like a dog chasing its tail, trying to ask which is more fundamental about the micro and all that. But maybe this is kind of a loaded question. Do you see us as more, like if you had to pick one or the other, do you see us as more of a fragment of this cosmic mind, or do you see us as more of kind of like a combination of mini minds? Do you kind of lean?
Yeah. I mean, again, right. Somehow that seems like it's a mistaken question, right? I mean,
Perhaps so.
it's sort of, both and neither kind of thing. Probably we're sort of in some tension behind, a fragment of the whole and a composition of the small. Sort of, everything in between is sort of, some kind of little tension along a spectrum, and it's it's like saying which end of the guitar string is more important. I mean, there's sort of like both. You got to have both of them, or you have to have a highest level system, and you have to have the lowest end, and everything that is in between is sort of along a hierarchy of order and structure. So, to me, it's a little bit of a misleading question to kind of say, is there one priority of one or the other, right?
Okay. And I suppose this does lead into the next question here. Would you say, I guess it depends on how you view physics and all that. Would you say all regarding the universe, it's like a conscious quantum field? Is that sort of how you see it? Or do you see it more of like discrete particles, kind of just, more, do you see space more like that, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, I suspect it's like, ours is always the one and only model we have to talk about mind, is our own mind, our own experience, right? And we really, I think we sort of have this sense of sort of fluid, integrated, kind of holistic kind of awareness of things. We don't discern particles and sub elements within our holistic sort of impression of the world. So, you have to sort of take that as your one and only model and extrapolate that both up and down the hierarchy of structure. So, I guess that's really our only option. We have nothing else to even work from. It's tough when you're bringing the sort of the quantum thing, because that's so sort of bizarre and kind of esoteric, and you probably need to know so much math to figure that out, that it's like way over my head. And
Same here.
I got a master's degree in math, and I still can't really make heads or tails out of quantum equations. So, in a sense, I don't really even try. So, it's one of those funny things where you can kind of maybe paint almost any picture you want, because it's so bizarre and kind of esoteric. So, I mean, it's kind of intriguing what might be possible. I probably there's a long way to go yet in terms of describing things really in terms of quantum fields, but yeah, it's an interesting area for future study for sure.
Yeah, I don't even like saying the word quantum, but that's the term I had to use. It's just the way she goes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so go ahead, Kyle. I think you had some questions here.
Yeah, we were just scratching the surface on it, but the next chunk of things would be some implications of your panpsychism. So we did talk a little bit about God or / the cosmic mind. Other things that pop up are, after death state, value. I guess the first one would be something you've already talked about loosely in the it was panpsychism plus panentheism, and you call it minimalist panentheism. God is wholly omniscient. And we said like all is within that cosmic mind. I guess the big thing would be like, could we be seen kind of like as thoughts within that cosmic mind, not in the sense that it's like this ethereal, but we're like concrete subjects, you could say. But I guess an analogy would be like thoughts in that mind, right?
Yeah, right. Again, it's an interesting theological discussion. I don't do too much of that because I'm not generally theologically inclined. But if you want to talk about God as sort of a cosmic mind, you have to say, well, look, every aspect of the universe must obviously be a component of that mind, right? Just sort of like every of those 100 billion neurons in your brain, every little one, every little state has got something to do with your current conscious state and feelings and sensations and so forth. So even though you can't tell it, but they're there, and we sort of know that they're there. So yeah, I mean, in a theological kind of view, we could have a sort of a God that's the mind of the whole, and we are parts of those. And our thoughts are sort of little micro thoughts in the thoughts of God, if you want to put it that way. I guess I have no real objection to that. You always got to worry about when you're talking about God and theology is bringing in, well, both traditional religion, which is mostly nonsense, and then you have to worry about the questions about moral implications, right? So any discussions of God, if you start talking about moral qualities of God, then you run into big problems, because then you got problem of evil, and you've got things of which you have no evidence for, and you're relying on divine inspiration, all kinds of nonsense. So it's all just, it just blows off into the superstitious weeds at that point. So yeah, you need to stay away from the moral qualities. It's not a being that you talk to, right? In the old picture where he comes down in the flaming cloud, Moses is talking to him or something. So in other words, it's nothing like that at all, right? It's just this all-encompassing mind, of which we and everything are little flashes of thought within that larger thinking entity. So it's nothing that you talk to. You don't pray to him. You don't fear him. He doesn't send down lightning bolts. I mean, that's all just the silly mythology that's been wrapped up around this thing. But we can construct a very rational and a very philosophical conception of God. And if we do, then we are part of that. It's a kind of a pantheism, a kind of stripped down pantheism, and we're part of that system.
Yeah, because I thought it was interesting because you did have that cosmic mind, like you said, it would be omniscient because you'd be there, it'd be omnipresent because it's all in it. The only thing that if you don't have the moral stuff, I guess it would be in a sense omniscient, not in the sense that you could build the rock you can't lift, but I think that question is kind of weird to begin with. But we would have the highest amount of power that you could technically have. So this one subject would kind of be omnipotent in a sense too.
Yeah, I mean, in the way of embodying all power and energy, I guess you could say, well, look, the cosmos is all energy, all power. But of course, that's not what most people mean by an omnipotent God, right? They mean a guy who snaps his fingers and poof, there's a mountain, and poof, there's a a freight train or whatever I want to do. Okay, that's silly cartoon stuff. So it's nothing like that. So yeah, I would be reluctant even to use the word omnipotent, right, with respect to God, like in this sense, except in a very qualified form. Yes, it's the embodiment of all the power and the energy of the cosmos, but it's not like he doesn't have the power to do things. That just doesn't really work. It doesn't really work that way. I always kind of like Aristotle, right? Aristotle in the Metaphysics has got this vision of God as kind of like just making the cosmos spin. He's just kind of like at the center of the wheel, and he's just thinking. He's just thinking, and here goes the cosmos spinning, right? And there's that famous phrase from Aristotle. These the thinking on thinking about thinking kind of phrase, right? And I mean, that's about all you can say. He's not really doing anything. If there's a he, you can talk about the God of the whole. He's just kind of this big thinking thing, and the whole universe is kind of revolving, and it's just thoughts are turning, and but then we're all part of that same process.
Yeah, it's kind of cool though. Like you have this one big cosmic subject thinking about all that's worth thinking about, I guess you could say. So
yeah, it is. It's an interesting idea.
So the next one would be like not necessarily people say afterlife, but like an experiential state after death. Some panpsychists say yes, some say no, some simply don't want to answer the question. And then they ask, well, what do you mean by we? But if you do ask the ones that say yes, they would probably say there's some kind of consciousness stuff. Maybe it's falling back into the whole, or you would have kind of a weird experiential state, but it's not like you, but it kind of is. It's like a broadened sense of you. But I think the main point is not like black or oblivion. There's something. It's just kind of weird.
Well, right. It's an interesting sort of question. Obviously, you're getting away from dualistic conceptions, so there's no little ghostly you that floats up somewhere and he's hanging around in heaven or something. So we don't want to talk about that. It doesn't make any sense. But it is sort of like, okay, if there's a conscious whole of the whole cosmos, and it's sort of like this conservation of energy kind of thing, right? Nothing's really created or destroyed. We just kind of always changing forms. And it's just kind of like you're sort of, I would say, you're sort of dissolving into the background consciousness from whence you came, right? So there was a time when there was no you and there was no me, and then matter came together and formed us for a little while, and we hang on for a little while, and then you sort of like dissolve back into the whole, right? And so it's not you in your form, but in a sense, you're not really going away. You're going back to where you were, you don't really remember that state. I don't know if people remember their pre-life existence. I'm a little bit dubious, but obviously there was a state prior to your existence, and then you came into being, and then you're kind of going back. So in the sense that the elements of consciousness maybe merging with something else, whether you remember yourself and you remember your experiences, it's probably unlikely, but and then maybe if you get built back up again, you might want to think about a reincarnation kind of picture, right, where your particles are coming back together again at some point in a different shape, in a different form. So maybe you're being rebuilt in a new way. Seems pretty unlikely that you would kind of remember any of those things, but some people claim this stuff, and in a sense you are being rebuilt. I mean, if we can accept that matter is just moving around, matter and energy just changing forms, you're in this form now, and then later your same particles will be part of a different form, and then they'll be part of a different form. So in a sense, you are being constantly reborn, because everything is kind of coming into being, going to the background, matter and energy, and then being built up again. So I think that's probably, the true insight behind reincarnation, maybe behind kind of eternal life, if you will. People kind of have this feeling, well, I'm always going to be here, or something's always going to be here. Well, in a sense, you will, you or elements of you will always be here. You'll be in a different form, but it's a different kind of life, a different kind of afterlife. But I think there's probably a good argument for that that we could defend.
Yeah, because I've actually heard what you said, the reincarnation one. You'd fall back, but you wouldn't remember, but there would still be like this continuing when you cut away all your memories, that subjective core that remains, that's not going anywhere. So that's interesting. And then the ones that do talk about falling back in, they would say it's kind of like being the universe again, whatever that may be like. It's pretty weird, but it's not oblivion. You don't have to worry about that, but it's going to be pretty weird, whatever that experiential whole thing is like. And
well, and like I say, you were that for like 15 billion years, right? Before you were you. I mean, you're just a little blip. It's just 15 billion, then blip, and then there's your life, and then you're whatever. It's another. So you're back to your normal state. I mean, a lot of philosophers kind of said this is an aberrant state, right? Just our sheer existence and our mental existence, our conscious existence. It is kind of like an aberration. I mean, some people have said you feel like in a sense, I shouldn't even be here. I mean, it's like so absurdly improbable, and
it's surreal.
It's like a surreal kind of thing, right? And it becomes like a plots for movies on kind of crazy things. But and I think there's a kind of a true little intuition behind that, right? And you can say, well, look, it's just this billion years system, massive cosmic system, and your little particles come together and blip, and here I am, and here you are, and we're having a little chat for a while, and then pretty soon, blip, we're gone, and there go, you're back to where you were. So, in a sense, all existence is kind of an aberration from this kind of cosmic background that is both a physical, I would say, and a mental background, and we're all part of that. We're still part of that, although we sort of have this illusion of being isolated, individual, right? Distinct individual. But it's an illusion. We're still kind of connected to that whole, and we're going to end up back in that hole, and that's to the whole thing, and that's kind of where we belong in a sense. So if you want to give a sort of a positive spin on this thing, which is always kind of nice to do, we're talking about death, that you say, well, look, this is your natural state. This is where you came from. This is where everything came from. Everything's going back there. And it's kind of like, it's like going home. It's going back to where you were. So maybe it's not such a bad thing after all.
We're going to close on that thought. Do you ever think about what it would be like? Like, you'd still have that subjective feeling, but what do you think?
Like what would you actually be in conditions to be in that afterlife state?
Yeah, that like after experiential death state. I mean, that's one of the big philosophical questions, I guess, right? Like, what do you think that's like? It's not nothing, but it's something. It's just what.
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. It's I mean it's like saying, well, it's like a Zen Buddhist question, right? Who were you before you were born? Yeah, I don't know. What was I before? What was your mental state before you were born? what was your mental state 10 million years ago? Wow, I don't know, right? I mean, it's like that's where you came from, and you're going back there. Like most of us, you can't tell me what your mental state was, your conscious state before you were born, because either you don't remember or it was just something wholly different that you can't even relate to now, and that's what you're going back to. So, to me, if you want to look forward, look backwards, because that's where you came from, and you're going to get back there. And if you can discern something from the past, then that gives you a picture where you're going. Personally, I don't know if I can say a lot, because I don't really can't recall those kind of states, and it's a little bit hard to put myself in that sort of total background state. But even just kind of talking about how mind, is part of a mental cosmos, and the whole of consciousness of the universe is kind of a single conscious thing. It in a way, it kind of gives you that sort of feeling. You kind of understand, like, this is what the cosmic mind is like. This is, what atomic minds might be like. And I've sort of belonged there. I'm sort of going back there someday. And, just as we talk through these kind of things, I think it maybe gives us a little bit of a kind of a feeling like, okay, you kind of know in some way, this is maybe where I'm heading. This is what I can expect. Maybe this is the way it should be, the way it's going to be. And that's the right way, because that's how the cosmos works, right?
Yeah, so it's pretty open, I guess. One quick one is just your idea on value. Do you think it's concrete or abstract? Some panpsychists like Thomas Nagel would say, yeah, value. There's some kind of value where evolution is going towards. Other people think it's just nominal. Some people like Goff think it's a real thing, like morality deep down.
Objective value, yeah. It's an interesting question. I've not really written too much on that. I've said things off and on, like, value, maybe in a sense existence is value, or mind is value. I mean that's kind of like the value state of the universe is this mental kind of thing that we are, and that comes out of to me, there's this question of order. So the universe is evolving, as I've written in my book on technology. It's kind of evolving towards order. So we're kind of moving in a direction. The universe is directed towards more complex order and towards higher, more intense forms of mind, from a very diffuse background, like we were saying, sort of Big Bang kind of state of mind, to ever more concentrated, articulated, complex forms of mind. In a sense, I think that's moving in a value positive direction. So, in a sense, higher orders of complexity and mind, I would say, embody that kind of value. And in a sense, it is a kind of objectification of value in terms of the complexity of existence, which corresponds to a complex mental experience. And I think that's sort of in the nature of the universe to sort of realize value, becoming better in a sense. I mean, it's kind of interesting. You go back even to the Greeks, you go back to Plato a little bit, but mostly Aristotle, right? And he has this idea that everything is working towards the better, right? This famous phrase in Aristotle, nature is striving towards the better. What is that? That's a value statement. Nature is moving towards better, higher, better states. So Aristotle had this basic picture. It was an evolutionary picture. And I think he was really right. We're moving towards order, and order is the better. That's a value statement. So we're moving in the direction of increasingly articulated value. And it's really kind of an interesting picture to think about. That's probably worth writing more about, right? How the evolution of complexity and structure in the universe corresponds to order and value and to betterness and to goodness, right? I mean, these kind of things are sort of seem to be realizing themselves as part of a natural evolutionary process of the universe. So, I guess at the highest level, that's kind of how I view it. I mean, there's value in sort of a more pragmatic sense, right? So value in evolutionary as a biological being, right? Value in terms of a social being. So the word value in a sense is quite complicated. There's a lot of aspects to it. So, you always, again, you got to be careful about how you're using those things. but sort of at the highest metaphysical level. And so, yeah, value is complexity, it's order, it's the complexity level of mind, and we're moving towards increasing articulations of mind, and that's a manifestation of value.
Okay. And I guess this next section is a little bit of a different category here. I was wondering, what are your thoughts on illusionism or eliminativism? Do you have any specific refutations of those viewpoints?
So traditional eliminativism, which is basically says we don't have any mind. I guess I assume that's what we're talking about here, right?
Yeah.
So so it goes back to Paul Churchland and some others who kind of famously articulated this view that if you drive physical materialism to the logical limit, which can explain everything and has no need to introduce a concept of mind or experientiality, then you can just drive it right off the cliff, right out the window, and you don't have it at all. So you can really sort of, press the logic to the extreme and say, look, mind doesn't even exist because I don't need it to exist. I can describe everything in physical terms. I can talk about physical evolution in scientific terms, and this mind stuff is just an illusion. That's what illusionism would be. You think you have a mind, but that's just an illusion, right? A rational thinker would have eliminated it. That's where the eliminativism comes from. Rational thinker would eliminate it from the cosmos completely. So mind really does not exist. Again, it's an interesting sort of argument. It has that kind of interesting sort of compelling power, like Berkeley and idealism does. You can really press the logic to the limit, and you can kind of sort of make your case. Yeah, in a sense, I can completely describe everything in nature and the universe and all in physical terms. And since I'm part of the universe, well, I must be described in physical terms. And in a way, I can describe human beings in physical terms. I don't need magical quantities, and I don't need, vital spirits and ghostly souls. I don't need that. I can explain it all in terms of physical stuff. So I could, in theory, postulate that mind is an illusion, and then I just don't have it. Again, that's sort of, in a reductio ad absurdum kind of argument where you're pressing your logic to the absurd conclusion. I guess you have to say, well, look, that flies in the face of the most fundamental fact that we know, which is that we are experiential beings. And that's fact number one. And you can't avoid that. There's no getting around it. You can't talk your way out of it. You are an experiential being, and you have mental experiences. And so if you develop a theory which drives mental experiences out the window and they're gone, then you've sort of used your logic to tie yourself into a knot, and now you're paralyzed and you can't go any further. So again, it's an interesting sort of paradox that you can pursue physicalist materialism to its limit and eliminate the mind. So again, I guess my answer is that's sort of like nonsense. You have to accept the fact that your conscious mind is fact number one about the universe above everything else, and therefore you have to account for that conscious mind. And by definition, if you've ruled that out, then your theory has failed. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting theory. It's kind of nice to have. It's good. It's interesting for argumentation case. It's interesting sort of as an educational tool to kind of help us think things through carefully. But in terms of the validity, so yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody really even believes it. I mean, some people sort of at least do in principle, but yeah, certainly not me. So.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I think it's like how you describe it. It's kind of like sawing off a branch that you're sitting on. It just really, I see it as self-refuting, really. So I couldn't agree more. One of the things they try to do, though, they try to bring up a rebuttal like this, something along these lines here. They'll try to say something like they say, considering that we are stuck, quote unquote, from a vantage point that is within the so-called illusion, aka consciousness, we are making a mistake in believing that it's something real, or that consciousness is just at least not what it seems. Sometimes illusionists take that stance. They try to walk it back a bit and say, well, it's not that the mind is not real, but it's not what it seems to be, or something like that. So do you have any thoughts on
that?
Well,
I mean, that's a valid point, because you'd like to be able to step back from it and look at it from a distance and then talk about it, right? But you can't, because you're stuck in it. It's sort of like, do fish really understand what water is? because that's all they know. That's their universe is water. So they, in a sense, they do, but in a sense they don't, because they can't, sort of hover up there in the sky and look down in the ocean and say, oh, well, that's what water is. It's not. It's different from this and so forth. Yeah, we can't really abstract, even conceptually. Probably we cannot extract ourselves out and then look back on conscious experience to kind of to talk about it from an objective standpoint. So I guess in theory, it is possible that because we're stuck like the fish in the water and we're stuck in a conscious universe, that we can't get out of it. We can't swim out of it because we're stuck in it like the fish are. And maybe that puts some cognitive limitations. I mean, I'm not surprised we got cognitive limitations. I mean, for crying out loud, we're limited beings in a million ways, and we probably have some fundamental cognitive limitations, and it may be related to consciousness that we're just not able to get up out of that water and look down. We can't get out of our minds and look back at our minds and kind of describe them in some higher level sense, right? I mean, we're not godlike beings, and we can't do that. We just have to accept that we are what we are, and from our limited standpoint, we can describe things in a certain way and come to certain truths because we are part of reality, and we can come to, I think, valid and correct conclusions about things, and they may be limited, but we have to accept those limitations as well. So that may be one of those limit points that we're just sort of stuck with.
Perhaps so. And speaking of limits, I wanted to check in, by the way, on time. I can see we have quite a few questions left here, but I want to make sure, are you still good on time, or do we need to perhaps skip a few questions?
I could go for another 5 or 10 minutes if you.
Oh, okay then. All right, sure.
Couple little main questions if you.
Okay, sure. Because I know there's at least one or two that I want to get to, and I can make them quick. Kyle, is there any major ones here that you want to get in at the last minute here? Because we're kind of running out of time.
Yeah, it was just a follow-up on that one, and then the question of why. Other than that, I think most of them are sufficient. So with that, like the eliminatist rebuttal, where they go right down to the very end and they say, okay, well, we're stuck in it. Well, couldn't you just bring up the whole brain in a vat thing? Do we live in the matrix? Is it kind of similar to that, where you could say, yeah, you can question anything ad nauseum, but it doesn't seem to be that way, and therefore it's probably not that way. And
yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, what Leibniz again went something like, maybe all of reality is a dream, but it's a realistic dream, and that's good enough for me, right? So yeah, you could say, look, yeah, maybe we're a brain in a vat, or maybe we're some program that we're running here, and we don't know, some alien construction or whatever. God forbid you could dream up with. But again, if that's the case, then maybe we're sort of stuck in this system. Again, you'd like to be able to poke your head out and sort of look back and kind of see this system that you're in, this matrix that you're in, from a higher perspective, kind of like being deprogrammed or red pilled or whatever you want to call it. But again, that's a little bit too it's good for the movie guys, but it doesn't really work for the philosophers. So yeah, I think those just kind of hitting those cognitive limitations. It's kind of fun to speculate. Is it possible? I guess until there's something like evidence that you could kind of say that you should take it more seriously. It's kind of a fun thing, and it's good for science fiction. But in terms of serious philosophy, I don't know that we need to give those things a lot of time. And like I say, unless something sort of new, some new arguments or new evidence surfaces, and then we can obviously reconsider it.
Okay.
That's
Did you have a quick call up there?
No, it was just about the meta problem of consciousness. How do you view that one? That's a big one.
Wait, sorry, explain that one again.
Sorry, the meta problem of consciousness. Do you think it's a valid point? Some people think it's not even important. They say, as long as you have the how, you don't need the why. But yeah, the meta problem.
The why as a meta problem, or why are we conscious, or why is there consciousness, or
so like, do you think there's actually a hard problem of consciousness here? Some people just throw it right out. They say no. A lot of materialists do that. That's a big eliminativism thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, to me, it's a given aspect of reality, right? So it's a fundamental datum of existence. And like it's like the dual aspect monism kind of thing. You can kind of say, well, why is that like that? And you're like, well, I mean, you keep asking why enough, and you just kind of run into a dead end, right? So you can't go any further. So, yeah, it just seems like, well, it's like space and time and consciousness. I mean, there's these fundamental givens of reality which seem to be irreducible qualities of existence, and you can say, well, why just those, and why not other ones? And well, maybe that's another one of those cognitive walls that we hit, and we don't know. We just get down to the bottom, and those things are there, and we may just have to take them as given.
Okay. And I know we're running short on time here, so I'll just make this quick too. One's more of a comment and the other one's a question. So I really admire your ability to look past some of the things that Ted Kaczynski did. When he's doing those bombings, and you were able to just be like, I want to look at his arguments, and he makes good arguments, and I'm going to work with him. So I really think in this day of cancel culture, how it's so prominent nowadays, I think people could learn from you on that. That you can still make some fruitful work and do things with other people, even if you don't agree with everything they've done or said. And so I just admire you for that. Just a compliment towards you there.
Thanks. That's a whole nother ball of wax there than this stuff that we've been talking
about.
And it might be worth another little episode here. If you want to do another show, we'd be happy to talk about, we could talk about metaphysics of technology and kind of what it's doing to us, and talk about Kaczynski's arguments. That would be a sort of a very interesting discussion. And
absolutely, we'll set that up.
Politics, I'm happy to chat about that too. I'm a former Green Party candidate here in Michigan, so I know a little bit about politics. So
absolutely, let's do a part two. We'll do that. And this last question here, if you have time still, I read somewhere on United with Israel, something like that. They sort of implied that you were for the boycotting of Israel or something like that. And I was just curious if you had any criticisms of Israel as to why we should boycott them, or are they even correct in characterizing you that way, or do you have any thoughts on Israel?
Yeah, they're correct. I mean, I've supported BDS movements when I was teaching. I'm no longer at the University of Michigan, but I was there for 15 years, and I was active supporting BDS. We had a large Arab student population they were sort of naturally interested in. I've always supported them in terms of BDS actions. My view is, well, look, I'm a philosopher. I teach ethics, and I have a sort of an obligation to comment on ethical issues in the world. The real world is not just Kant and Mill. We can apply ethics to the real world, and you get to look at ethical outrages in the U.S. I'm highly critical of U.S. actions, highly critical of Israeli actions, particularly in Palestine, but what else they're sort of doing. So strictly on an ethical basis. I was and still am open critic. So that's
excellent. Okay, we'll definitely have to go down that road perhaps on another episode, because I'd like to get your thoughts on there more for sure.
Can I just put in one more thing?
Sure.
This is just a fun little closure, but what do you say to those stalwart materialists who say that, well, you're going to be wrong one day, Skrbina, we'll show you that panpsychism was wrong? What do you say about
that? I'm pretty sure I won't live that long, so maybe someday when I'm dead and gone, they'll prevail. But I don't think so. I think those guys are on the losing end, and they're gonna, panpsychism sort of coming back. We spent a couple thousand years, and it was a respected and dominant position, and it kind of went away for about 100 years thanks to logical positivism and mechanistic materialism. And I think it was just a little aberration, and I think those guys are on the losing end of history. And but I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know. I mean, I guess a chance I could lose, and so be it. But I'm making my bet.
I'm putting my money with Skrbina. I'm betting with him. All right. Okay. Well, hey, we really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us and giving us such thoughtful answers. So thank you very much for joining us. And do you have any other thoughts you'd like to share before you go?
No, that's it. Just good discussion. Thanks. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have a good one.